Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, Chin Up Goggles, the new generation of vision training. Its simplistic design eliminates downward vision, improving a player's spatial awareness, anticipation, skill acquisition and execution. The findings have been supported by scientific research in CIT, now MTU. Be sure to visit chinupgoggles.com for more. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On episode 75, I am delighted to be joined with Meath Ladies 2021 All-Ireland winning defensive coach Shane Wall. In this episode we discuss his coaching career, how 3 Balkan-class men helped Meath Ladies to victory, making disciplined over default decisions, defensive coaching and so much more. Hi Shane, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast.
Hi Orla, great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Before we get into everything, would you mind giving a slight elevator pitch to the listeners and the coaches who don't know who you are?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So Shane Wall is my name and I'm a coach with the Meath Ladies. Currently a coach with the Meath Ladies. So we were successful last year in the All-Ireland and I suppose that's my claim to fame at the moment. But yeah, I'm a Wicklow man originally, from Baltinglass, and yeah, that's about me, I suppose, in a nutshell.
Very good. There's a couple of years from Wicklow in the Meath setup. How does that happen?
I tell you, to be honest, there's a full-time coach in Wicklow, and he's the head coach of Meath. He's originally a Meath man. His name is Paul Garrigan. He's an old cat, but he would have moved to Baltinglass, I suppose 10, 15 years ago. And yeah, he's really involved in football and he was involved in our ladies team. And he made connections with Eamon Murray, who would have been over all the underage Meath teams. And yeah, when Eamon was going for the Meath job, then he got in touch with Paul, and Paul would have been a club mate of mine, and he would have been my last manager. And I would have, when I finished playing, he would have asked me to get involved with him in our club in Baltinglass, and then he would have brought me up to Meath with him then when he went in with Eamon.
Very good. At what stage in your playing career did you realise that you wanted to be a coach, and how did that happen?
Oh, very late, I'd say. To be honest now, I got injured at the end of my career, and it kind of just dawned on me then, I suppose, what am I going to do with myself? I don't think I ever had a real mad, burning ambition to be a coach, to be perfectly honest. But like it grew on me now, to be honest. Yeah, and saying that now, I would have been helping out with our club teams and stuff like that when I was still playing.
Yeah.
But to get to a really serious level, it probably wouldn't have been a burning ambition or anything in mine, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. And why do you coach then? And why did you kind of pursue that and become, a coach in a very high level when you didn't particularly maybe have an ambition all the time to do that?
Yeah, it really just grew on me, and year by year, it kind of it took over and it got more infectious.
It's addictive.
It is, yeah, it is, and obviously, like I love me football, and it's as I learned as I got older, like there's so much more than just playing with football. And it's a great social outlet, and. Like Paul would have been one of my really good friends. He's the head coach up in Meath. And when he asked me to go in, it was just such a good opportunity, both socially and from a football perspective, and to the challenge of working with such a good team, and with a new challenge with working with ladies. It kind of snowballed from that, from just helping out to, getting to a really serious level.
Yeah. How do you find being involved in a female setup, coming from the men's side of the game? What did you make of it, particularly maybe at the beginning?
At the beginning, I was so nervous, to be honest with you. Like, you probably don't realise this, but your coach is probably thinking, like a room full of 30 girls, 19, like you would be kind of nervous to begin with. Yeah. But yeah, I have to. I heard you asking the question before about the differences between like men's and ladies side, but I have to say, like, the Meath girls are so they're so good natured and so welcoming. Like really put you at ease, I have to say.
Has your playing career ever impacted your coaching style, or like, for example, if you were giving a player feedback or if something happened, you would be able to enter the kind of the mindset of a player as you were a player before?
I'd say it has now. Just when you mentioned that, like, it was just, we're deep into kind of physical running now, and there's a couple of players like that wouldn't be natural athletes, if you get me.
Yeah.
I've been a natural athlete either. I would have found all the training and the physical work especially really difficult, the aerobic stuff. And, you know, I kind of have that empathy for those players, and definitely, you know, I can sense when they're hurting and when it's tough on them.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, yeah, there would be things, and even you pick up things from your own playing career, like, that you can bring into the setups. Like, I remember in my last year when I was playing, we used to push up from kick out. Like, we were trying to play a sweeper, but we used to try and push up. So we'd be always pushing up a line. And I remember trying to bring that in the first year in Meath. Now, we've changed so much since then, but yeah, like that would have been the first year I was there. We would have tried that little tactic.
Very good. How did you become a defensive coach, and how do you find it watching other teams? Are you going to a game to enjoy it, or do you find yourself slipping into that coaching mindset of, look at what they're doing, can I rob something here maybe?
How did I become a defensive coach? That's a good question, because I was a forward, not a very good one. I was a forward. I tell you, originally now, I actually I did a year coaching with Paul, our head coach in Baltinglass, and I was doing like performance analysis. And from that, like that, when I originally went up to Meath, it would have been mainly that.
Okay.
I would have performance analysis up there. Like, I did a couple of courses. I did one in UUJ, and I did another one through the GA, and like, I really focused on that at the start. But as time went on, Paul said, listen, I can get somebody else to do stats, but I really need somebody to help me with the coaching.
Yeah.
So he just asked me, which would you prefer to do? Would you prefer to do the forwards or the backs? And I just thought, like, I don't know why I thought it was easier, because probably I thought it might be easier to do the backs. I think there's more structure in backs.
Okay. Yeah.
Like it's in our forwards. I know Mick Bowen even said it. Like, our defense is very structured, but our attack is a bit chaotic and a bit mayhem. And there is that, like, with forwards, that you give them that kind of freedom to attack and that kind of carefree abandon.
Yeah.
But our backs are more structured, I suppose, and coaching backs is kind of more structured. So yeah, I just thought that might be an easier route to go.
Yeah. Is it at the intercounty game at the moment, both male and female structures have come in a lot, and everybody, like, it's cliche now with the basketball plays, but how much is it down maybe as a percentage to a structured game plan versus flair, and you just, like, for example, you give me the ball and I just do something with it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose you can't really put a percentage on something, like, or it's very difficult to put a percentage on something, and a lot of the time the answers are, like, in the grey area. So, like, obviously there is so much structure involved in the game plays and stuff like that, but you can't underestimate, like, being able to play off the cuff, like, and being able to be put in any kind of situation in a game, and to be able to perform the skills under pressure, like all that constant decision making, game intelligence, that there's always going to be a place for that, no matter how structured your game gets. Like, they're the players and the people that will unlock the game, and of course they're great to watch and make the game what it is too. So I think there's always going to be a place for that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you can teach that? Is it something that as coaches you can tailor your session towards that, teaching players how to be off the cuff and different scenarios, or is it just something innate that they have?
I think, again, a bit of a mix. You can't. I definitely think all the skills you can coach. Mm-hmm. So we'll say, like, you might look at a player and you say, oh, he can turn either way or whatever, but he's probably very much practiced, like, his left and his right all his way through. So you can definitely coach the skills. So from that point of view, you can make certain magic moments easier, if you get me. Yeah. So, like, if you have a brilliant skill set, obviously, like, magic moments are going to come easier to you. so from that point of view, yeah, you could coach that, but there is that thing like an imagination, if you get me. Like great players like the Gooch or whatever, they nearly know what they're going to do before the ball comes to them.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the more times you put people in game situations and like in those situations where they have to use those skills, and the more times you create that environment, I think it kind of encourages players to be more creative.
Yeah.
You know what I
mean? Yeah, I know exactly. I actually asked a couple of people there for questions, and Joe had a really interesting one. He wanted to know how much time do you spend on playing games in training from small-sided to full pitch?
Oh, we did a lot of small-sided games now, to be honest. I would say now, last year was kind of a condensed season with COVID and that, but I would say nearly every session, or at least 3/4 of the sessions, we played small-sided games.
Okay.
We'd have different conditions and different rules on them, but we were big into our games. It's just the whole thing of practicing your skills and then kind of including that decision making. The small-sided, brilliant for that.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of skills, it's been nearly a constant question on the podcast, you probably know it, but what is the most underrated skill or attribute in the game at the moment?
Underrated. I thought I was listening to Hannah on your podcast the other day, and she really made a good point about instep kicking. You know, that is something that I think the ladies' game in general needs to work on, and Meath and all the top teams. You know, like I still think there's a bit of a tendency to punt kick, if you get me.
Yeah.
But it's a skill that needs to be developed. But like even just looking at our Cork game, say in the semi-final, like I went through our turnovers and the reason behind them, and you know, like some of them were very basic skill mistakes. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't do enough skill development, even the basics, just to be able to open up the two sides of the field, which with both sides, and you know, to be able to have all those skills in the basic skills in your repertoire, like it just makes the game so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Something I've come across with the podcast and with chatting to intercounty players and other elite athletes outside of the podcast is the mindset that they have. Can you speak a little bit about that mindset and give us an insight into what it takes, putting aside the physical attributes, but the mindset that it requires to be an elite level player?
Yeah, I'd say like they're obviously, well, our group are hugely driven. They're very dedicated. They're very much self-conscious of taking their own destiny into their hands. I heard the phrase before, like point the thumb and not the finger, so they know, like, you know, they're in charge of their mindset and being in control of that all the time. I think there's also a thing. And I heard it before. I can't remember who the guy was. I think he was on John Sullivan's podcast. I think his name was Tim Kite, and he talked about like players have this kind of decision to make, and it's either above the line or below the line. He called it default or discipline. So like all your decisions are either default or discipline.
Yeah.
And so like default was easy, and it was like, you know, like if I'm sitting on the couch, you know, will I do my stretching? No, I'll have a bar of chocolate instead, or watch the telly, or, you know, but discipline was, right, okay, I need to do my stretching now, or I need to do my gym work, or I need to have a good snack instead of just making something easy. And he said, like, the top players are constantly picking the disciplined decisions, and over the course of time, the accumulation of all those disciplined decisions, that's what makes you an elite player.
I love that, and I love that the way he described it, the default and the discipline. That's really clever, and you're an absolute pro. I was just about to ask you what separates the good players from the great, but you have it already. I want to ask you a bit about. Mark actually submitted a really good question. He wanted to know, because you're a defensive coach, how do you approach the sessions in terms of, do you split into forwards and backs and you do a designated session with the backs, or how does that work?
We when it comes to like, there'll be certain parts of the session like we'd split up. So like maybe we might do some kick out work. I'd take the backs, and maybe our goalie, or a lot of the time we just ran in backs and forwards. That was really something we worked a lot on in training and getting our shape right and stuff like that. So yeah, I take the backs, and there'll be probably maybe 12, 15 backs, I suppose, or something like that. We'd split the midfielders between us, and we'd work on all the things then we wanted to do with our backs then.
Okay. And how do you improve the individual players in a group of, let's say, a panel of 35? How do you find the balance of helping somebody, for example, I'm just picking a name off the top of my head, Vicky Wall, improve something specific versus the team environment?
Well, we'd have regular one-to-ones, and we'd kind of have I've heard it called different things, but like as an individual performance plan, I think I've heard it called that. But yeah, we'd have different all the components of a player or whatever, and we'd just have a chat about where we think the girls need to improve, where they can get the help from, and what they can do to improve, to get, say, like from a 7 out of 10 in one category up to a 9 out of 10. So yeah, that's what we do individually. Like we pull them aside, and it's been Zooms the last couple of years, but before that it would have been we would have met after training, whatever, and
okay,
there was things to work on.
Okay, very good. And as a team, do you focus more on your strengths or weaknesses when you're looking to improve?
Oh, our strengths or weaknesses. I think we're very much a team to concentrate on our own game, but yeah, no, there'll probably be a fair balance there actually. When I think like when we're going from game to game, we'd often work on the stuff that didn't go well in the previous game, but there'd be a fair bit of like, oh, this is what we're good at, let's perfect it as well. Like, you know, there'd be a nice balance.
Okay, very good. Because I was wondering, like, it's funny, some teams our coaches would speak about focusing on their weaknesses, and then it's like, oh well, their strengths are falling down because they're completely focusing on one area without focusing on the other.
No, I have to say now, you know, like we kind of built it layer by layer when we're going from game to game. Like we'd very much take it like, what did we not do well last week? Yeah. What are we expecting next week? And then like, you know, trying to correct the things we didn't do well, and trying to work on the stuff then that we wanted to perfect for the next game.
Mm-hmm, totally. Is there much player feedback in terms of you giving player feedback, obviously in an individual point of view, but them submitting, let's say, post-game reviews are becoming very popular? Is that something that you guys do with the team? Yeah,
we nearly always at the start of training, the next night after a match, we'd probably just do a quick review, and we'd open it up if anyone had any feedback. We'd probably say like what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do better, stuff like that. So yeah, after every match we'd have a little discussion before training. Wouldn't be for long.
Yeah, okay. And do you have a leadership group with the girls, or is that something you've stayed away from?
We did last year, yeah, and we're going to this year as well, yeah. So we would have had about 5 players involved in the leadership group, and yeah, they would have worked together.
Okay, and is that nominated by you, or did the players select the members?
Do you know what? I think we definitely had our captain and vice captain. I think that might have helped. Even though I think do you know what? It was definitely us actually in the end. We decided in the girls, yeah.
Okay, very good.
There might have been a bit of chat, what do you think of A, B or C? But no, it was the management's decision, all right.
Yeah. I think, was it last February, I think I heard this famous thing about everyone was doing their individual runs, obviously, but in the depths of lockdown, when everyone's on their Zoom calls, if I told you that you were going to win the Division 2 League and the All-Ireland Senior Championship, what would you have said to me?
I would have said you were mad, really, to be honest. Yeah, I still, it's hard to believe now, even months later. It doesn't really feel like it actually happened. I don't know when it, but it was just such a meteoric rise, and you know, it just came not going to say I went nowhere because I thought we were improving steady every year.
Mm-hmm.
But the last jump would say like from intermediate to senior, like I thought we improved, say, bit by bit in intermediate. And I thought it might take the same length. So it took us like 3 years to win intermediate. I thought it might take the same length then when we got to senior to be competitive. I never thought there was any skill issues, or I never thought like, oh, this is absolutely impossible. But the speed in which they did it, the speed in which they improved, like over the course of a year, like just kind of took me back. And every game I was just thinking like, oh, like are we going to be brought back down to earth every game? But it just and it was fantastic in that sense because you just never knew what was going to happen every game.
Yeah.
Do you know, when were asking me like, "Oh, will you beat Cork or would you beat Dublin?" And I hadn't. I just kept saying like, "I haven't a clue." Like I haven't. That's just where it was. Like it was just a meteoric rise, and we just kept meeting different levels, higher levels that we only dreamed about playing.
Yeah.
And we just played really well and kept improving. Like we played Dublin like in a challenge. Say what would have been November. So November, like say 15 months ago or 14 months ago or whatever. So when we were coming to the end of the intermediate season, and they absolutely hammered us. Like we couldn't get the ball kicked out to them. And like I remember Emma Duggan's father was at the match, and he asked me like what was the score at halftime, and like I completely lost count. Like it was we were about down at halftime, and then. Like I had that in my head, like going into the match, and like, is this actually possible? Like that you can up that difference in 1 year. But there you go, you can if you.
What was the biggest difference then to come back from that challenge game? What was the major evolution that occurred in 10 months, 9 months, even?
It's hard to put your finger on one thing. I definitely think. There was never any skill issues. You know what I mean? So like it wasn't like you're trying to do something impossible. Yeah. You know what I mean? Sometimes teams just don't have the footballers or don't have the skill levels to compete at a really high level. But even in that challenge game, we're absolutely hammered. I knew there wasn't any skill issues, and we said that actually in our post game review that like we didn't feel there was a skill issue or that they were doing things with the ball that we could never do.
Yeah,
it was more just operating at a higher level, a higher pace, and just I suppose probably some strength issues and physical issues rather than issues. If you get me, we made changes to our system and our tactics now, and they probably tightened us up. So, yeah.
Very good. And when you're going through, like you spoke about there, the 3 years it took to win intermediate, and I know before you got involved there was a couple of big losses for Meath. How do you keep a large squad motivated? Like for example, the girls that aren't on the matchday panel, that are on kind of the low 20s, high 30 number of the panel. How do you keep them motivated at that level when they're committing so much of their life to football?
I think we always try to make the point that everyone was equal. We always treated everybody as much the same as we could, if you get me. And I know every player is different, and it's a different key to unlock every door. But at the same time, like from our point of view, from a management point of view, managing the players, we try to give equal opportunities. Like for example, like when we played challenge matches at the start of last year or whatever, or the year before, like we'd have the teams evenly split, and we'd try and give everyone nearly to the minute the exact same game time as much as we could. And we always emphasised that everyone was really important to the squad. Like, and even though you mightn't be on the field, that like you were really like we needed everybody, and everybody was important. And just because, let's say Vicky or Dougie might be able to kick it over from 35 yards from the sideline or with their back, like it didn't make them any better person or any more important to the group than say whoever was number 35 or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was Andy Moran's book, or I was listening to a podcast with someone, and they were a player, and they spoke about the players that, let's say, just got time in training and didn't get match day time on match day, and they spoke about how those players were the ones that drove on the match day panel. So, for example, when you mention Vicky and Emma, it's the girl that's marking them or pushing them at training that I think, and from what I've heard, is the reason why they're that good. So it's not just this two woman show. It's the 27th member in the team that's pushing Vicky to give her the season that she was given.
I think everyone was genuinely like. We'll say like if somebody else was playing in your position, I felt like people were doing their best to make whoever was in their position their life easier, or they give them their full support or their full, and there's a real sense of camaraderie that way. That everyone was just delighted for everyone that was playing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
And was that something that was already there in the team, or did you have to help create that and develop that?
I feel like when I'm talking to the players, they often say like they were craving like an environment. They say a professional environment. Obviously, it's an amateur sport, but like a well set up or a good setup, or a well run setup, and they really craved that before we arrived. And when they got it, like I think they were really thankful for it.
Okay.
And like they have a lot of supports, like in all aspects of the game. Like they're obviously their diet, nutrition, their S&C, their aerobic work, psychology. There's just so many aspects like that their support's there for them, and I think they were craving that. And when they got that, they were really appreciative of it. And yeah, just the fact that it helped their games. Like we were there to support them and to serve them almost, and they really respected that. I have to say, and even going back to the point about the difference between lads and ladies football or whatever, speaking as somebody who was a very thick-headed 20-year-old or whatever, like I thought it was incredible the way the girls dealt with all the losses. Like, like I could be driving up after one of the losses and I'd be thinking, oh God, like will they lose faith, or will they think somebody else should be in charge, or that A, B, or C was the problem, or point fingers or whatever. But you really couldn't believe the positive attitude when you drive up after a loss. It was like nothing ever happened, and that wasn't the way when I was playing like lads football or any lads teams I've been involved in. Like you could tell lads would be down after a loss, but I never got that with Meath. Really, never got that. And that's testament to them. And maybe it's just that group. I don't know. But yeah, they took it in their stride. I think the losses made them as well. And they recognised, like after every loss, they improved. And it made the team what it is. And that on the High Performance podcast, the one Wolf, and he said, what did he say? He said, the day we lose is the day our competitors regret.
Yeah.
And really, it kind of summed us up in a lot of ways. Like, every time we lost, we banked it, and we improved on it, and it made us a better team. And I think in the end, it nearly gets to the stage where, like, well, okay, if we lose the match, we lose the match. We're going to get better. And there's almost a sense that you're not afraid to lose then, and you can play off and that kind of abandon. And you always play your best football in when you're in that kind of flow state, that when you throw the shackles off and have a go.
Exactly. Speaking of the professional environment and diet, where did the spice bags idea come from? Who was that?
That is not a part of the diet nutrition plan. Our goalkeeping coach last year, Paddy Dowling, he loved the spice bag on the way home, and there'll be just when I said earlier we play a lot of backs and forwards, so there would have been a lot of spice bags riding on the who'd win the backs and forwards. They're very competitive, more competitive nearly with the management than the players.
Brilliant. You did speak about the losses there, and there was an article, I think it was Emma Troy mentioned it, but she spoke about the rocks that you gave the girls, the individual rocks, and before the final you gave everyone a pebble. Can you explain that analogy for people who haven't heard that story?
Yeah, so like I think we would have handed out, or it was Paul's brainchild, but he would have handed out a different shaped rock at the start. I would say 3 years previous in the journey, like a bigger rock, and the rock kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, um, as the challenges went up. And then like it's harder. It's obviously harder to crack the smaller rock. So
Yeah,
when we got to the last challenge, that was the smallest rock, and if we cracked that, that was it. Then.
brilliant. In terms of, you mentioned the time commitments there for players, but for management, can you give us a bit of an insight into what it is like as an intercounty manager in terms of the amount of effort and time that goes into it?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty brutal now, to be honest. You really want to love it. You'd want to love your football, and even travelling from Wicklow to Meath is quite a trek. Um, you could be getting home late at night. I remember people in Meath probably won't appreciate this story, but I was coming back from Meath, and it was really late. I was by myself. I wasn't travelling with Paul that night. It could have been during COVID, actually, or maybe something like that. But I was travelling by myself anyway, and I'd say it could have been after 12 o'clock at night, and I wasn't far away from home. And a guard stopped me, and he said, it was close to where I live. It was only about 10 miles up the road here. And he said, oh, where are you coming from? And I said, I was up in Meath training a team. And he kind of looked suspiciously at me, like, like this, Wicklow.
It's dodgy.
Yeah, it's well. And he said, where are you from? And I said, no, I'm from Wicklow. I'm just from up the road there in Baltinglass. He was getting even more suspicious now. And he just kind of put his head in and he said, are you telling me now that it's gone that bad in Meath that you had to get people from Wicklow to train you? But yeah, it is. It's quite time consuming. And even like before the All Ireland, like I'd set me alarm. I'd say I did 3 weeks of like 5 o'clock in the morning, like getting all my work done before work.
Jesus.
And yeah, so I like to be in the state, and we all do. I think all the management, we all like to be in the state coming up to the week that we have everything fully covered and we know what we need.
Yeah, and a lot of the girls actually spoke about that, but I wanted to briefly mention the Cork game. I remember watching the game, and I was sitting on the sofa, and there was a couple of minutes left, and they just announced Emer Scally as player of the match. I think that was it. And I remember kind of being like, oh, the game's over, it's a Dublin Cork final or whatever. And can you just describe the last 60 seconds and what actually went through your head on the sideline?
I had all my stuff packed up. I was ready to go back to the dressing rooms and all. Like I thought we'd lost, like, obviously, but yeah, it was just insane. Like it's like something you'd read like in a book, or like or you'd see in a film or something. Like 7 points down with about 2.5 minutes left or 2 minutes left, and we really struggled to get the ball or get possession of the ball. And then when we just got one turnover, it kind of spiraled from that. And it just escalated so quickly, like into like a mean scenario. And we just kind of carried it on into extra time then as well. It was insane. Like, it was once in a lifetime stuff. Like, you could live 10 lifetimes and you wouldn't be involved in a match like that. Even at under sevens or under, like, you'd never be involved in something like that. 7 points down with 2 minutes to go and you turn it around.
And can you describe the dressing room after you win the game and you go back in, and even from the management perspective, what was that like?
Oh, it was insane. We were going absolutely crazy, jumping around the place. Just couldn't believe we're in a final. Like, and it was just so hard to believe, like, from where we came from to where we were, like, competing against Dublin, and even thinking back, like, to that challenge match where they absolutely annihilated us. Like, we'd be thinking, like, a year on that we'd be competing against them in a senior final. Like, was just bizarre, really hard to explain.
By the time you got home and got settled in after the Cork game, how do you approach the final? How do you, as a management team, look to the couple of weeks ahead? How do you structure it? Where did you start?
I suppose we kind of looked at let's say, like, what Cork did well against us, because Cork had us on the back foot for, like, an awful lot of the game. And we were looking at the things they did well and presuming, like, like Dublin would do a lot of those things, and we tried to work on those things, trying to counteract those. And obviously, like, we had seen a lot of Dublin, like every team has, and we kept a really close eye on them and what they were doing. And just how they operated as a management team as well. And so we knew a lot about Dublin prior to the match. All the work we did on them like was kind of specific for the game, but we already had a bank of information on them, and like we had a lot of information on players and fed that information to the girls. And I think it was about a week after the Cork game, we knew exactly what we wanted to do and what we needed to practice in training. And we had a good training weekend, and we went through an awful lot of that in the training weekend. I think that might have been maybe, I can't remember, was it the week before? Probably was the week before, the weekend before. So we did it, or maybe it was 2 weekends before, but we did a lot of our what we wanted to do in that training weekend. So yeah, it was a mix of taking the learnings from the Cork match and then what we were expecting from Dublin and how to manage that the best we could.
Can you share a couple of the things that you did and adapt to and kind of go into the Dublin game? Like, how did you set up for them, and how did you kind of preempt what they were going to do?
I have to say now, a lot, like, even though like we knew what Dublin were going to bring, and we talked about what Dublin were going to bring, we're very much a team that likes to focus on ourselves and getting our own shop in order. And like when I say we took the learnings from the Cork game, it was very much like, oh well, we're looking at ourselves here now. We're trying to improve ourselves to get to a new standard, to get to a higher level for ourselves. If you get me,
mm-hmm.
Rather than being totally bogged down with like. We need to change our game to match Dublin's or to counteract Dublin's. Like there wasn't a hell of a lot of that. It was more so like improving our game. Obviously we would have had information on players, and a basic example would be Hannah Tyrrell kicks with her left, and you'd have a profile on every player and what they're and stuff like that. But at the same time, that's only information that the players kind of bank. Rather than it wouldn't change the way we play, if you get me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. One of the things I was really impressed with, I think Jerome Quinn had a clip from, I think it was up in the top of the Hogan, but was the press on the kick out, and I was delighted to have you on because I wanted to ask you a bit about that. What was the thinking and the preparation like in terms of Ciara's kickouts and the focus of for that game?
Actually, I have to say, like I would have watched a lot of videos, and I have to say, like, I was so impressed with Ciara. Like, so it certainly wasn't going after Ciara, if you get me.
Okay.
And I think anyone that's been watching us playing the last couple of years know that we're aggressive with the opposition kickouts. We do like to take chances. We'll throw caution to the wind when we think is appropriate, and it's been the same for every opposition that we love to press a kick out, and it's specific to Cara. And even though obviously we scored the goal off one of our kickouts, there was probably only about, I can only remember 3 kickouts that probably our press disrupted them, if you get me.
Okay.
But I suppose that's all it takes. Like when you win the ball that high up the field, and you have such a good chance of scoring or at least getting a shot off or an attack,
Yeah. I had a couple of sources, I won't reveal them, but they were talking about how they were instructed or they heard that they were shouting Ciara's name on the kickouts. Can you explain where you got that from?
Oh, God, that'd be probably one of the girls come up themselves, to be honest. You definitely wouldn't have been telling them to shout Ciara. I don't know. Yeah, that's a new one to me now. Yeah. I have to say this now that you mention it. Like, the girls, they're like, let's say Paul was wearing Ferna, and Eamon obviously was banished over, and the two guys were on the line, and like you're so redundant there. Like only for the water breaks, like you literally, like it's nearly impossible to get onto the field.
Yeah.
So loud, and that's one of the things we learned as the years went on. Like, let's say the first year we were in Croke Park. Like you can't believe, like 10 meters away, and especially in the ladies' day because there's so many kids there and screams, the screams. So like you're 15 meters away and you can't hear like the like who's shouting. Like, you can't communicate with anybody.
Yeah.
So like it would have been, I'd say after that Tyrone game, we would have put a big focus on the players managing the games themselves.
Okay.
So like our interaction with them was absolutely minimal. Like, you know, like we would have given them a few instructions at the water break, and obviously at half time we would have given them quite a lot of information of where they were at, etc.
Yeah.
But the on-field management like was purely down to the guards, and all the way they set up for defending and kickouts, attacking. We have no input in that. We don't say you stand here, you stand there. It's the guards that are deciding that.
Okay.
Another example. I didn't know they were shouting Kira, but there you
there you go. How do you find the water breaks actually as a coach? Would you like to see them stay? I don't know if it's confirmed for this year. I can't remember, but would you like to see them become a part of Gaelic football?
They're very beneficial for the coaches, I think.
Yeah.
And after saying the example there, like you literally can't talk to anybody like in Crow Park on that day. Like it's impossible to get a message in. And from that point of view, yeah, it's great to get the girls even for 5 minutes to get some instructions across. But I have to say, when me was over, I went back to being a supporter and going to games like I love doing, and you know, watching games. Like it did kind of take the sting out of it, you know. But it's a coach's dream, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With the preparation for the final, I think it could have been Emma again. I can't remember who, but they spoke about. I think it was the week before the final. There was a presentation done on being an underdog. What was the approach as the group to being in the underdog? And give us a bit of insight into that presentation.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with the lads. Like, you know, we obviously knew we were massive underdogs, and we started off the year like as if not probably the rank outsider in the competition, just up from intermediate. But like we had a list of like we came up with like a load of outsiders. Like there was Leicester City obviously winning the Premier League. There was the Miracle on Ice, and there was 10 or 12 examples like of huge odds, like overcoming the odds.
Yeah.
And winning tournaments, like just from the point of view that it was possible. And another point we made was like, you know, like even though it's saying Naomi Ozaki was a big outsider, the first major she won, you know, like 2 weeks later she was one of the favorites for the next tournament she played in. So like it's a perception,
yeah,
from the outside world rather than the reality. Like she wasn't one week she wasn't 500 to 1 shot. The next week she was one of the favorites. You know what I mean? Like the reality was that, you know, she had a good chance in both tournaments. It's just that people didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. In terms of nerves, you had obviously been in intermediate finals, but for yourself even, what was it like going into a senior final?
I probably wasn't too. I think Crow Park can be quite daunting. So we were very lucky in that we played like the couple of intermediate finals, and we had the National League final and the semi-final as well. So we played quite a bit in Crow Park. I think the girls were really... I didn't feel any nerves, and even in the warm-up, I would have been running a warm-up, and you know, I kind of got the sense they were comfortable enough and happy enough. And I suppose when you're that much of an underdog, it probably helps as well. Like you're under no pressure. Like we were really just happy to be there, and you know, like competing with Dublin was a dream 12 months ago, and like when you're there then and you're actually doing it, like what's there to be afraid of, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's a good way of looking at it. How do you structure your warm-up out of interest, just as you mentioned it there? Is there anything particular you would do, particularly on a match day?
We're kind of spicing it up a small bit now this year, but last year we would have done, what would we do? Eugene OSullivan is our S&C coach, so he'd do all the athletic preparation. He does like kind of sprint work, and then he would send them over to us, and we would do some small-sided games before the match. So we try and get all the limbs going, and the skills. We try and practice all the skills during our small-sided games and conditions on them. And then we'd probably just do a shooting exercise, something like that, to just before the throw-in.
Mm-hmm. Joe actually had a question. He wanted to know what sort of influence Eugene had on the squad's development. Like, he even mentioned there, competing with Dublin 15 months ago, the biggest thing you saw was maybe strength, that maybe was the weakness rather than skills.
Eugene, he's very professional, and he's very knowledgeable, and he's a master at what he does. he's a real perfectionist too. And even just thinking about him there a couple of weeks ago, he was telling me we were in Ashburn and we were doing a session, and he said there was a couple of lads came into the gym afterwards and they were doing their gym sessions, and he said he just looked over and there was one lad and he was like had his knee all in the wrong position. He said he just couldn't let it go. He said, "No, you need to pull this like this." Right?
Brilliant.
And I was talking to myself, yeah, that's Eugene. He's a real.
When in the final during the game, what's your role on match day in particular?
I've often done the Maraferna. Last year I was in the stand and you'd be taking your notes. Like, we'd say at halftime, like we might split up as well into backs and forwards. But this is what we were doing. We changed from year to year, and we like to up and keep kind of keep it fresh, if you get me. Mm-hmm. But last year, yeah, we would have split into backs and forwards, and so I'd have all my notes rolled out. Like, I'd be keeping my notes about what we can do better and what we need to do in the next half or whatever. But of all that rolled out, and all the backs would come over to me at half time for 5 minutes, and then they go back for the main speech and they get their information, etc. But yeah, I've done the Maraferna as well, but I have a dodgy knee now, so I'm probably.
Can you give us a bit of an insight into the dressing room at half time during the final? What was the messages going through the group? What was the emotions like in the dressing room?
It was very calm, I have to say. And like I'd always, even though my heart would be pounding, like I'd try and keep calm myself. Calmness is kind of contagious, so you don't want to.
Love that.
You don't want to start going crazy, even if you are going crazy inside. You don't want to spread that to the players. But no, I like I said, like, I have all my messages already, so it's just a matter of delivering those messages. Mm-hmm. And now the girls will be like really focused, and there'd never be shouting or roaring or table banging. Like Paul would usually do the main speech, and he'd always do the main speech, and he's very composed. You wouldn't catch him losing the rag nearly. I don't think I've ever seen him really losing the rag. He's very much giving information and getting the message across rather than banging tables and shouting rubbish. Like there's a message there that he's always giving, if you get me.
When did you realise you had won the game? At what point did you say, right, we have this?
Oh, not till the last. I'm a kind of pessimist. I think I'm a bit of a pessimist. I'd never count my chickens before they'd hatch. And even just that Cork game, sure, you couldn't after that either. You know what I mean? Like, so quick to turn around. So it was about 30 seconds to go, I'd say. And we had possession, and I knew we were capable of just holding it for 30 seconds, so you could, on the countdown was so automatic in the ladies' game. Yeah. I was counting down the seconds, and with 10 seconds to go, I just completely, I was shouting. I really did. There was no calmness or no composure. For sure. I completely lost it then. Actually, true as God, I actually fainted for a second or two.
Did you?
I did, yeah. I did. I was beside the FLO and I had my arm around her, and I was obviously screaming. I can't ever remember screaming as just completely went blank, had stars, and I just kind of shuddered, and thankfully came around before I hit the ground. The two were legged it then out the gate. Yeah,
very good. After all the celebrations, there was actually a really good clip. Was it the night of the final after he's won in the hotel with the crowds outside? Have you analysed the game as a group yet? Have you sat down and kind of looked at it, or is it left in 2021?
No, we have. We closed off 2021 before Christmas.
Okay.
We were a review of where we were, and one of the other coaches, Mark Brennan, Carlo man, he did a really, really good review of where we wanted to go, what we were last year, and where we wanted to go, and set it out in stone, like, what we wanted to, set it out in stone what happened last year, and then Paul would have came along then said it last week and said out what we wanted to do now this year going forward.
Okay, and is it mentioned in the group setting maybe during a session that about 2021 and being the All-Ireland champions, or is that just a new season, new and fresh sheet here?
Oh, no, it's not really mentioned now too much, I have to say. Very much looking forward. You just don't have time to be like, you don't have time to just keep moving, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many like challenges in your face every single week, like, like 3 sessions or 4 sessions, whatever the girls are doing, and we're so busy preparing, you don't have time to sit down and admire. But I actually did at Christmas. I got a chance to look at the game and just kind of relive what happened. But after that, like, I haven't even thought about 2021, to be honest. I don't think any of the girls have either.
Okay. And what's it like going into 2022? It's completely flipped now. Last year you were the underdogs, but now you're the target on the back. You're the pack is now chasing yous.
Yeah, big time, and a whole new set of challenges. But like, we've had new challenges every year, and it's really like, new challenges are brilliant, and like, everyone wants new challenges, and just that feeling you get from like being a novice. Like, we're a novice at being a champion, if you get me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've been champions. We don't know what that. We've never been senior champions. Like, we don't know what that feeling is like. We don't know what threats or opportunities or anything like that. And like, you do. It's great to be a novice because you learn so much. Do you know what I mean? You're in that mind frame when you think, when you're not sure of yourself, or when you're not sure of your surroundings or whatever. You're so conscious of, like, wanting to learn quickly. Do you know what I mean? And it keeps you out of that comfort zone.
Brilliant. I love that term. I've written down a couple of notes here beside me. I'm going to ask you for a coaching book or podcast recommendation. Someone actually said stop asking people for podcast recommendations because they won't listen to your show, but you can throw in whatever you think.
No, I like your one, to be honest. I'll give you a big plug there.
Thanks a million.
What other ones do I listen to? I like The Way of Champions with John Sullivan. Okay. That's a really good one. I just think he's really good. And I coach a lot of kids teams in the club, and I always have done that for 10 years odd. So I just found him really, really, really. He's easy to listen to, but he's very insightful, very sharp, and he covers like kid stuff. Plus, he'd cover like elite level stuff as well, and it's just a really good podcast to listen to for all things coaching.
How do you find moving from that's 2 completely different levels, kids and senior championship? But how do you find coaching between the 2?
I love coaching, and even how I got into coaching was like would have been the games manager in Wicklow was my coach underage, and I would have played with him then. He asked me to get involved with him, and we just had a great time. Hugh Kenny is his name. He's the games manager in Wicklow, and we would have coached plenty of underage teams together, and we just had great crack. Like, it was so enjoyable. I suppose that, when you were asking me earlier, I suppose that was probably a big reason why I kept coaching, or why I got into coaching, is that I had such an enjoyable first experience with him. I think it's really important, especially when you're starting off, that you have a mentor. So he's the games manager in Wicklow, and he's a genius with activities and stuff like that. But also that you have your friends around. So I would have got on well with you, and we would have been good pals or whatever. So like, from that point of view, like, I always enjoyed going up there or volunteering my time. Yeah. Because like there's a social aspect to it too,
Yeah, exactly. If there's any new coaches or younger coaches listening, what advice would you give them?
Never. Oh, this is probably borrowing Colin Nally's. All the stuff I'm saying is probably borrowed off. I know you call him on, didn't you?
I had him on, a while ago. Yeah.
He always says don't pass up an opportunity to coach, and I think that's a really good one. Every time you coach, you learn something. But I suppose it's the same in every walk of life. Like, you never very rarely regret actually doing something. Like coaching or any kind of activity that involves your friends or a pastime. You very rarely regret giving up your time for something like that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to move on to the sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. You've had loads of time to think of yours, so I have big expectations now. Question 1, what is your favourite quote?
Okay, I have heard this. I don't think it originated with Mickey Hart, but I heard Mickey Hart used it, and it's Commitment means staying loyal to what you said you were going to do long after the mood leaves you.
Wow.
So I find, and it's especially appropriate at this time of year. Like, everyone has the same dream, like, I'm going to make my squad, I'm going to make the team, I'm going to play really well, and I'm going to do all my S&C, and I'm going to be the best version of myself, and I'm going to be, this is going to be the best year ever. But even though everyone has that dream, as the year goes on, it kind of wanes. And I find that the people that are the elite players or the very successful players, they stick true to that. Like, they don't like the dreams. They don't shake off the dreams after 2 or 3 weeks, or when things get hard or when things get tough. They really commit to something. You know what I mean?
That's a brilliant first answer. I'm now really lining you up for a second one. But out of interest, do you use quotes much with the girls, or is that something you don't really look at?
I think I've used that with the girls before. That particular quote. You would, like, we picked up loads of things, and we might, like, we're there so long. We've done so much. I suppose we nearly have covered this, but yeah, we there would have been times if we take extracts or stuff like that. I remember now, just when we were talking about, like, the girls and their on-field management. I don't know, do you know Fergus Connolly?
I do, yeah.
Game changer, and that was one of his books. But he had some really interesting thoughts on players taking ownership and how it was essential, and we would have shared a lot of the stuff that Fergus was saying with them, and I think we recognised pretty quickly, like, like our role in the big games, etc. Like, it had to shift to the players managing it, and the players having, like, taking responsibility, and because it's not a game of chess,
Yeah.
So many different combinations and variations on a football field. Like, you can't say, "Oh, move your leg left," or you have to step. You can't move from this spot, or you have to move. If the ball moves here, you move here. Like, there's such a changing sport, and the girls really have to take responsibility of how they play and how they manage the situations and how they set up.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there would have been times, like, going back to your point, there would have been times like we take stuff from other coaches and try and spread the message through their quotes, I suppose, to the rest.
Very good. Question 2, what's the best sporting event you've been to?
Even though I'm a big GAA head, I have to say it was Man United in Barcelona, in Old Trafford. It was in a Champions League semi-final. And you would have had Ronaldo versus Messi, and I was in Paul Scholes scored an absolute screamer, and it was 0-0 from the first leg in the new camp, and it was just on such a tender. It was on tender hooks, as in, like, it was 1-0 in the last few minutes, and then if Barcelona scored, they would have been through an away goal. So it was really so tense and so nervous. But I never forget when the final whistle went and they were into the Champions League final. The stadium actually shook. Feel the stadium shaking. It was crazy. Like,
yeah.
I love the Dublin and Mayo games as well now, and the Dublin Kerry games. They were really good. I love those. But Man United Barcelona was something else, I have to say.
Brilliant. What's been the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
I busted up my knee the last year I played. I busted my knee and it finished me. I had to get an operation, and the doctor just said, like, you won't be playing anymore. I probably should have finished about 5 years before. Yeah, that's a story, but I found that fairly devastating. Like, he said, like, oh, you won't be running, you won't be playing any five-a-side or anything like that.
Wow, geez, you did a good job of it then.
I did, yeah, I did a really bad job in it. Probably need another couple of operations soon enough. But anyway, I just thought, I was listening to your podcast a couple of weeks ago, when Jenny was saying, like, about Jenny Cody was saying about, like, like, players can't be just footballers or whatever. You know, I thought that was a really good point in that, you know, like, I was kind of wondering, like, what the hell am I going to do with myself now? Like, I can't kick a ball around anymore. Like, or I won't even be playing five-a-side now. Like, what am I going to do with myself? But, like, I think it's important then for players to realise, like, you know, like, it could be over, like, you know, like that or whatever. And to have another interest. And I suppose that's probably another reason why I got into coaching. Like, I couldn't play anymore. And it kind of kept me involved in the game as well, you know?
Yeah. That's actually, you've heard a couple of the episodes, probably heard me speak about it, but injury is the reason why I did this. Like, there's always something else you can do. This is keeping me involved in a completely different way, even to coaching, and I'm attempting to play, and emphasis on attempting. I'm not really playing much, but it just shows, like, you know, there's always something else. And I really like the way you spoke about it there, is kind of, you know, that seemed to be the injury kind of really threw you into coaching.
Yeah, it did. And straight away, like Paul, the head coach of Meath, he was on to me straight away after, you know, like, give up that football and no way back for you now. Like, you make
Brilliant. What's been your biggest achievement so far, on or off the pitch? And I think I already know the answer to this, but
yeah, on the pitch, I think you know the answer. Yeah, it's probably at Ireland. Off the pitch, I have to give credit to my great wife, who I met when I was 16. I'm 39 now, so I met her when we were in school, and by absolute miracle, I managed to keep her. By I don't know how she puts up with me going up to Meath and endless nights out, and yeah,
she's the real champion.
Yeah, oh damn well. Yeah, I've often been told I'm punching above my weight, so yeah.
Brilliant. Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Not to be so focused on just the winning or the outcome.
Okay.
I would have played a long time with my club. I think I gave up about 5 years ago. So I'd say about 34 I gave up, but I started when I was 16. So I was playing all that length, and I can honestly say, like, all the years I thought the only success was if we won at the end of the year. That's such a horrible way to think of it now. When I look back, I'm almost ashamed. And I even remember doing my level 1. And I remember the tutor was saying, like, oh, there's so much more to sport, and there's like you can get so much out of it, not just like winning games. And he said, does anyone else feel like that? And like I was still in my 20s, but I was looking around and I was thinking, like, no, like I have to win, like everything. If I don't win, like, this is an unsuccessful year. But it couldn't be further from the truth. And as I got older, like I realized how silly I was, and how you know, like, there's so much more to sport, like the camaraderie and the spirit, the community spirit that clubs can bring, and the social element and the friends you make, and the challenges, of course, like trying to compete with the best, etc. Like, that's a big part of it too. And yeah, so like I would have beaten myself up. I remember, like, games, like, you could lose a game, and I remember not getting out of bed the next day. I was so disappointed. I suppose that when you're that age, you kind of put that to the front of your life, and as you get older, you realise, like, you know, there's more important things in life than just the results. So
it's nearly been a permanent fixture on the podcast as well in terms of the questions. But what would be your personal definition of success then, seeing as it's really evolved then?
I'd say my definition of success, probably constantly trying to be the best version of yourself, you know, and I think half of the battle is in that challenge. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, the journey of trying to be the best version of yourself, rather than, you know, the outcome. You know, like, enjoying all the parts that make up being the best version of yourself. Like, you know, like, you're obviously going up to training, meeting friends at training, enjoying like the discipline that elite sport would bring to your life. Yeah, just all the different components that make up the journey. I think you kind of need to stop and appreciate every one of them, because they're the real reason you're playing. You know, it's not. And you know, it's great. It's great to have won something, to be able to say this. You know, like,
you wouldn't have said this 12 months ago.
No, I would have thought maybe 5 years ago, if somebody said that, oh, you know, like, it's all about the journey. I'm saying to myself, oh God, that's only because he hasn't won. And I'm not saying this is the only way to the top. Not the only way to the top. Like, some managers are really cutthroat and, like very much to the point. And like, I wouldn't say we're that way at all. But it just goes to show, like, you don't have to be that way to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be banging tables. You don't have to feel under pressure. You don't have to be so cutthroat. And there's other ways of winning.
Brilliant. Who would be your dream dinner guest and why? And you can open up the table to a few people if you want.
I would be perfectly happy with my family and my friends. I met some great friends along the way through football and other things, and I'd be perfectly happy with all them. More than happy, it'd be great. But if I was to pick one sporting person, I'd probably go with Johnny Wilkinson. I don't know, did you?
I did.
Yeah, you heard his podcast and the High Performance. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Now I really did, and I think there's a kind of you have to be impressed with the way he's been there, he's done it, he's scaled the heights, and it also seems like he's like really gone into the kind of knowledge part for our understanding why he felt the way he did. Like he's done his research in that, so it's experience and it's learnings. If you get me, research and learnings, and the combination of that, like I would have shared with a couple of players, and it's very much black and white as well. Like I would have shared with a couple of players, and I'd say, like, I'll have a listen to this. And some of them, like, they wouldn't even respond. I said, that was it. They wouldn't respond. And then there was one of my friends that he's coaching Wicklow under-20s now this year, but he said he nearly crashed his car when he listened to it. That's the kind of podcast, I suppose. But it had a big effect on me, I have to say.
Yeah, God, it was phenomenal. I listened to it in full, and I've now listened back in parts, and I still just can't get over some of the stuff he said. Like, I was going to even ask you there, what was, was there a particular big takeaway? But even as I'm thinking of it, I was like, I had about 7, and that's only me dissecting it now.
Yeah, and you know what? And this is often the way with podcasts or things you read. Like, let's say, like, you listen to it, and then you go off in tangents in your own head and get your own ideas off that. Then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I often write down, like, what I learned in podcasts. You might be able to see here all these musings from all my podcasts. I write it down, but you could go off in tangents then from this and start developing your own ideas and your own theories and things and the way the world works.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to mention briefly his part about potential. I thought was really interesting, and it reminded me a little bit of you guys in terms of, if you had walked into the room, as he says, and I'd asked you what's the potential of this Meath Ladies team, and you said, well, I don't, what was he saying, like, when you don't really know, that's when you're onto something. Thinking of it now, like, that was kind of the reminder of your team.
Definitely, and the way he talked about, like, there's no ceiling and stuff like that. Like, it would have been something now that I would have touched on with a couple of players since the All-Ireland. Like, a lot of players would have kind of felt a void, or like, where do I go now? Like, like,
okay,
scaling, what's the biggest task or for a player, I suppose you could call it, and they were, where will I go now? But, like, you think you get loads of examples in sport, like, why do Kilkenny hurlers keep coming back, or Cork ladies, or Dublin ladies, or Dublin lads? Like, it's not to, and it's another example, it's not just to win. Like, it's more than that, and it's the challenge of it all, and that kind of constant train that's on a journey and it never stops, and there's never a ceiling on where it stops either. Like, like, I could say to you, like, you've won an All-Ireland, but like, you're not good in your left foot, like, and then you start, okay, here's my next challenge, and there's always a challenge onto that. You're never going to reach. It's a never-ending journey to reach your potential.
Exactly. A final question before I let you go. You've been so generous with your time. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
I was really flummoxed with this, and I'd heard you ask a good few times to other people, and I was just like, I don't know what to say there. But I'm going to say I was a novice, and I like to think of the mindset you have when you're approaching something as a novice. And I know we spoke about it earlier, but like that whole kind of freshness that it brings. And even Johnny Wilkinson spoke about it, when he was 18 and he came on, and he was so thankful for the 15 minutes he got in his debut, or the half an hour he got in his debut, and he was just so full of energy and wanted to learn, and he was so into it, and it was such a buzz. And I think being a novice or being in that situation where you want to learn so much, I think that's the spot to be.
I love that. Just briefly before we wrap it up, Johnny Cooper actually spoke about that with his Be Unrivaled page. It was, always align your behaviours with day one. Day two is when complacency sets in, and that what you said there just reminded me of that. But look, thank you so much, Shane, for coming on. I absolutely love this. Very best of luck next year with Meath, with everything, and thank you so much again for your time.
Thanks very much, Orla. Thanks very much for having me on. Take care.
A massive thank you to Shane for joining me on the podcast today. This episode was recorded a number of weeks ago before the Little 2022 League campaign. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did get something from it, be sure to let both of us know. If you are enjoying the podcast series, I really appreciate if you leave a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as it really does help the show grow. Thanks to Chin Up Goggles for sponsoring the series, and to you for listening.